Am I the a-hole for defending myself against my stepdad on Christmas Eve? I'm 26F. I've always had a complicated relationship with my stepfather. Let's call him Chris. Chris is a big guy, 6 feet 2 inches, about 250 pounds. He's always had a my way or the highway temperament, but for the most part, we've managed to maintain a surface-level peace for the sake of my mom. My mom is someone who hates conflict. She's the type to let a house burn down around her as long as no one raises their voice about the smoke. I drove down to their place on Christmas Eve. We usually do our big family Christmas on New Year's Eve, but I wanted to spend extra time with my mom. I brought my 2 dogs with me. One is an older girl, an ex-hospice dog I adopted years ago. She's an angel, quiet, doesn't beg, and she knows the house well because she basically grew up visiting them. The other is a newer addition I call Mr. Man. He's a rescue, still learning the ropes, so I was being incredibly vigilant. I'm talking Velcro dog level of supervision. I followed him into every room, watched him like a hawk near the furniture, and made sure he was let out every hour. The evening actually started out great. It was one of those rare moments where things felt normal. We were in the kitchen, the smell of garlic and butter filling the air as we made seafood pasta. I had a glass of wine, we were laughing, and Chris was actually being sweet to Mr. Man, sneaking him little bits of shrimp and petting him. I remember thinking, maybe this year will be different. Maybe we're finally past the drama. About 6 hours in, the vibe shifted. One of their dogs, they have 2, peed on the floor. I know for a fact it wasn't mine. I had just brought Mr. Man back inside from a walk, and my senior girl was asleep on her rug. It was one of their dogs, but Chris didn't see it happen. He just walked into the room and saw the puddle on the hardwood. He snapped instantly. The fun Christmas Chris vanished, replaced by this red-faced, vein-popping version of himself. He started screaming at my mom about her dogs and how the house smelled like a kennel. I stayed quiet at first. I've learned that when Chris gets like this, it's best to be invisible. But then he started getting personal, calling my mom names, belittling her for not training the dogs better. It was getting uncomfortable. I finally said, "It's not a huge deal, Chris. It's just the hard floor, it wipes right up." He spun around and glared at me.
"Fuck you," he spat.
I felt that familiar sting of adrenaline, but I took a breath. I decided to butt out. I wasn't going to let him ruin the night. I figured if I stopped engaging, he'd cool off. Except he didn't. He refused to clean it up, sat down on the couch, and just started bitching loudly about how disrespectful everyone was. If he had asked me to clean it, I would have done it in a heartbeat just to keep the peace. But he didn't want it clean. He wanted to be angry. Eventually, he stormed into the kitchen, cursing under his breath. My mom looked exhausted and whispered that she wanted to go outside for a cigarette. I told her I'd go with her. As we were heading toward the door, Chris intercepted us. He started pointing a finger at me, telling me it was my fault, that my mutt was the one ruining the house. I kept my voice level. I said, "Chris, I swear my dogs didn't do it. I've been watching them all night. But if it makes you feel better, I'll go grab the mop right now." That should have been the end of it. Instead, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm going to strangle your dogs." Everything went cold. You can say a lot of things to me, but you do not threaten my animals. Especially not my senior girl who can't defend herself, and not Mr. Man, who finally felt safe for the first time in his life. I'm 5 feet 7 inches, and while I'm smaller than him, I don't back down from bullies. I looked him right back and said, "If you touch my dogs, I will punch you in the throat." Was it a nice thing to say?
No.
Was it a de-escalation? Definitely not. But I wasn't going to let him stand there and threaten to murder my pets in front of my mother. He lost it. He screamed, "I will *CK you up," and started coming toward me. I honestly didn't think he'd do it. I thought he was just posturing. I stood my ground and said, "Go ahead then." He rushed me. It happened so fast. 1 second I was standing by the door, and the next, this 250 pounds man had me in a violent headlock. He was facing me, pulling my head down. I was terrified. In my hand, I happened to be holding a hard nylon dog bone I'd picked up off the floor moments before. I started hitting him on the arm with it, just trying to get him to let go of my neck. Then he did something truly bizarre and terrifying. He shoved his thumb deep into my mouth. He was trying to hook my jaw or push on the back of my teeth to force my head back. It felt like he was trying to dislocate my jaw. I did the only thing I could do. I bit down. I bit him as hard as I humanly could. When he yelped and loosened his grip, I broke free. I saw the mop leaning nearby and grabbed the stick, swinging it to keep him back. But he was faster. He lunged again, grabbed a fistful of my hair, and slammed me down onto the marble floor. My head hit the stone with a sickening thud. Before I could even register the pain, he moved his legs over me, trapping my head between his calves and squeezing. He was literally trying to crush my head with his legs while my feet were still scrambling for purchase on the floor. My mom was screaming. She was hysterical, yelling at him to stop. She tried to pull out her phone to record it, but she'd been drinking and her hands were shaking so badly that she only managed to capture a live photo. You know, those 3-second clips. In the photo, you can see the blur of the struggle, the absolute chaos. I eventually managed to wiggle out and bolted for the door. I ran outside into the cold night air, gasping for breath. He followed me to the doorway, shouting that if I called the cops, I'd be the one going to jail because I attacked him with a bone and bit him. My mom came out, crying, begging me not to call the police. Please, she sobbed. It'll ruin everything. Just come inside. Let's just get through the night. I was in shock. I stayed until 5 a.m., mostly because I was too dizzy from hitting my head to drive safely, and I didn't want to leave my dogs alone in the house with him. My mom spent those hours apologizing. She let me sleep in her bed, while Chris pouted in another room. She kept saying, "Chris is an asshole. He's so wrong for this. I can't believe he did that." She gave me my Christmas presents early, her hands shaking as she handed them over. I drove home as soon as the sun started to come up. By the time I walked into my own apartment, the adrenaline had worn off and the reality set in. My lip was swollen and purple, my jaw clicked every time I opened it, and my scalp felt like it had been set on fire from where he ripped my hair. Then, the 180 happened. Over the next few days, I tried to talk to my mom about what happened. At first, she was supportive, but then, slowly, the narrative started to shift. It was like she and Chris sat down and choreographed a new version of the night. Suddenly, she wasn't saying, "He put his hands on you first." She started saying, "Well, he rushed you, but then you started hitting him, so he was just defending himself." I asked her, "Mom, how is a 250 pounds man defending himself against a 160 pounds girl by putting her in a headlock and slamming her head into marble?" Her response? "He was just being a wall. You ran into him." I told her about him, sticking his thumb in my mouth. I asked her how she could possibly think I was the aggressor when he was the one who forced his hand into my face. She actually said, "Well, your mouth was open during the fight, so you could have just leaned forward and bitten him." She chose to believe that I, mid-panic attack, being strangled, decided to casually lean forward and bite a stationary thumb. She stayed with him. She went to his family's house for New Year's. She celebrated his birthday with him last week like nothing happened. She told me I was being disrespectful for not apologizing to him for hitting him with the dog bone. I've cut them both off. I haven't spoken to my mom in weeks, but I'm sitting here feeling like I'm the one who's crazy. My own mother watched her husband assault her daughter on Christmas Eve, and she's chosen to gaslight me into believing I started it. My extended family is calling me dramatic and saying I shouldn't have threatened him if I didn't want to fight. I feel like I'm grieving a mother who is still alive, and it's all because of some dog pee on a hardwood floor. So, am I the a-hole? Did I start it by saying I'd punch him if he touched my dogs? Is there ever a scenario where a man that size is defending himself by slamming a woman's head into a floor? I need some perspective before I completely lose my mind. Update. Hi everyone, I knew I had to make an update, and thank you to all the commenters who gave me the courage to do the right thing. I owe you my life, so after reading all your comments I did report him. It took me a little time to get there. After I posted, I kept going back and forth in my head about whether it was really as serious as it felt in the moment or if maybe everything had just spiraled out of control and gotten blown up into something bigger. Reading through what people were saying here made it harder to sit in that uncertainty. There wasn't a mix of opinions or people brushing it off. It was consistent. People were calling it exactly what it was, and that clarity pushed me to stop second-guessing myself. When I finally made the call, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt very matter-of-fact. I told them I needed to report an assault, and they asked me some initial questions before telling me to come in and give a full statement. Going there in person was probably the hardest part, not because of anything they did, but because it meant sitting down and saying everything out loud in order, without skipping over anything uncomfortable. I told them about the entire night, from the beginning when everything was normal, all the way through to when I left at 5 in the morning. I didn't leave out the argument, the comment I made about punching him if he touched my dogs, or any of the physical details of what he did. I explained the headlock, the way he forced his thumb into my mouth, the way my head hit the floor, and how I got out of it. I also told them what happened after, including the threat about me going to jail, and how my mom initially supported me, and then completely changed her position. Both officers I spoke to looked shocked by the time I finished. One of them asked why I hadn't reported it sooner. I told them exactly why. I said I was threatened right after it happened, and that I didn't feel safe escalating it at the time. I also explained how confusing it was having my mom shift her story so quickly because it made me feel like I didn't have any solid ground to stand on. They asked if I had anything to back it up and I told them yes. I had taken photos when I got home that showed the swelling and bruising, and I had the live photo my mom accidentally took during the attack. I explained how I got that photo from her phone that same night. When they reviewed it, you could see the shift in how seriously they were taking it. The clip isn't long, but it shows enough movement and positioning to make it clear that this wasn't mutual or evenly matched in any way. After that, things moved quickly. They didn't treat the time gap like it made it less important. They told me they were proceeding with it, and not long after, I got a call letting me know they had gone to the house and arrested him. Hearing that didn't feel like some big moment of closure. It was more like everything settled into place at once. There wasn't any more room for the version of events my mom had been pushing. It was being handled for what it actually was. Since then, everything on that side of the family has gotten worse. My mom is fully blaming me. There's no hesitation or mixed signals anymore. In her mind, I escalated a situation that should have stayed private. She's focused entirely on what this means for him, not on what he did. Every time she's reached out, it's been framed around how I've affected his life, his record, and the stress this is causing. None of it acknowledges the fact that I was the one who ended up injured. She's still repeating that he was defending himself. Even with evidence, even with the police involved, that hasn't changed. If anything, she's more committed to that version now. There's a clear divide, and it's not something I can fix by explaining things differently. I stopped trying to argue with her. There isn't a version of that conversation that goes anywhere productive. It just circles back to the same place where what happened gets minimized and shifted around until it barely resembles reality. So I've stepped back completely. I haven't gone back to their house, and I don't plan to. Other people have reacted very differently. I've had extended family members reach out who I didn't expect to hear from. Some of them said they weren't surprised, which was honestly hard to hear but also made a lot of things make sense in hindsight. Others have been very direct in saying that reporting it was the right decision, regardless of how complicated it's made things. A few people have pointed out that this wasn't just about that one night. They mention his temper, the way he talks to people, and how it's been brushed off for years. Hearing that didn't change anything about what happened, but it made it feel less isolated, like this didn't come out of nowhere. The legal side is ongoing now. I've given my full statement, submitted everything I have, and there's a process moving forward. There have been follow-up conversations and confirmations, but most of it right now is waiting for the next steps. It's not fast, and it's not something that resolves in a neat or immediate way. It's also not something I regret. Before reporting it, everything felt unstable. It was like I was constantly being pulled between two versions of the same event, and it made me question myself more than I expected. Now, even though there's more happening on paper, things feel clearer. There's a record of what happened, there's evidence attached to it, and it's being handled outside of personal bias. Day-to-day life has been quieter. I've been at home with my dogs, keeping things simple. They're completely fine, which was one of the biggest concerns I had coming out of that night. They've been more attached than usual, following me around and staying close, but otherwise everything with them is normal. Physically, I'm better than I was right after it happened. The swelling went down, the bruising faded, but my jaw was sore for longer than I expected. Even now it still feels off sometimes, especially when I'm eating or talking for a long time. It's not constant, but it's a reminder that it wasn't just a quick scuffle that left no impact. Mentally, it's different. Not worse, just different. There's less confusion, less of that feeling like I'm losing my grip on what actually happened. Things feel more grounded now, even if they're not easy. I haven't spoken to my mom since things escalated. Not because I'm waiting for her to come around, but because there's nothing to build on right now. Until she acknowledges what actually happened, there's no real conversation to have. I know cutting that off sounds extreme to some people, but staying in contact the way things were would have meant constantly defending reality, and that's not something I'm willing to keep doing. For the people who are worried about my dogs, they're safe and exactly where they should be. Nothing has changed there, and nothing will. I don't feel like I'm losing my mind anymore. That's probably the biggest difference from where I was when I first wrote this. Things are complicated, and they're still unfolding, but they're not confusing in the same way. There's a clear understanding of what happened, and, for the first time since that night, it actually feels like that understanding is enough to stand on. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update.